Hey everyone, welcome to your 41st PHP tutorial, and in this video I want to talk about variable scope. So what this means is it's not saying like a scope like a gun or anything like that. A scope in PHP is saying what can use this variable. So every variable has a scope. I'm not sure if I talked about global variables or not, but for example, if you have two pages and we have a variable x over here, well by default this variable cannot be accessed by this other website. The same thing is if you have a function within this page with the variable x, well, you're not going to be able to use this variable down here unless it's a global variable. A global variable means it can be used anywhere on the page. So basically, let me just explain this from the beginning. Variables have a scope. That means they can be used in certain areas. So here is our web page or our programming code, and we have a variable x which has the value 20, okay? And we open our PHP, which I'm not going to do that here, I'm just showing you. Well, if we then use this variable down here, obviously this variable is going to be able to be accessed here. But if we have a function down here that we create, and we say the variable x is equal to 45, well, these two have different variable scopes. So that means this x is different than this x. This is a function level scope. This is a complete page scope. So basically, they are pointing to two different variables. The best way I can illustrate this is using a whiteboard and colored markers. So, I guess I'll use red to illustrate our page. So up here, we define a... Okay, of course it's not going to work. Try this one. Alright, this one should work. So up here, we define the variable. Alright, so here, let me try this, because obviously I'm having difficulties. We use blue. The variable x has the value 20, okay? That means we have a variable. So this box is the variable, and the variable is x, and it has the value 20. Alright, now we have a function. I'm going to do that in green. So now what we have is a variable x with the value 30. Well, this is actually a different variable. It's weird, but now we have two variable x's which both point to two different values. So this x points to 20, this x points to 30. So then, if we change the value of the variable x out here, I guess it'd be in blue then, well, that's going to change the value of the first x up here to 45. So as you can see, by changing the value of x, we cannot even affect the x within the function. That's because that x is only available within that function. So the only way we could change this value is by doing that within the function, which would then give the x the final value 35. So that's just what you need to think of. That's how that is going to work. So obviously if you create a variable out here and you reuse it in here, it's not going to work. If you create a variable in here and reuse it out here, it's not going to work. This is where the idea of global variables come in. If we wanted to have it a global variable, we could before we define it, use the word global. Oh crap, no. So is equal to 30. Well then what this is going to do is it is going to create a global x. That means our green x, variable x, and our blue variable x both point to what's known as the global variable. Basically, these are the same variable now, and we get an overall variable x. Man, my reds are not working. Nope. There we go. So now both of these basically combine to create one global x, which will point to the most recent value. So if we define it here 20, it's now going to point to 20. But then as we go on in the program, we reach this function, we change that value to 30. And then out here, if we use the same variable, it's going to change it to whatever we make it out there. Just make sure when you're defining it that you have to put the word global before it. So otherwise it's not going to point to that global variable. It's going to point to that specific variable within that function or whatever else like that. Another thing to remember is if you include a file, so if you have your actual page and you include a title or a header within your page, and you define a variable up here, obviously they are connected to be like one page, so that means you can use this variable down here. But if you define a variable down here, you can't use it before, you can only use it after. So you're not going to be able to use variable y unless you define it before it's used. That's sort of like what we talked about in the last video. You have to define the page title before you can use it. Also, if you create a variable in here, you can only use it after the include. If you create it in here, you can only use it after the include. It's always after. So yeah, that's the basics of variable scope. So hopefully that was helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you and subscribe.